Return of the Mount Hua Sect, Chapter 163. No, even though you had to do it, this is too much. It's pouring. Formidable and dense rocks of amazing sizes began to pour down. It looked like an earthen tsunami was crashing down. Dust rose like clouds and plummeted as the rocks exploded downward. Jump off! It was the moment Chongmyung had shouted. As soon as Chongmyung spoke, the disciples of Mount Hua flew towards the floor without a moment's hesitation. Their bodies reacted before their minds even had time to process the action. It was truly a fantastic relationship of trust. But others didn't understand the situation. No! You bastards! Jump now! Don't you idiots understand words? Chongmyung kicked anyone he could and threw them down. What is... I'm going to die! Chongmyung grabbed the person next to him by the collar and threw him off the cliff without delay. You're insane! Everyone began to fly down the cliff at lightning speed. If someone, pung, speaks, pung, you should listen. Chongmyung swept over the cliff like a storm and kicked everyone he could. Those who saw his actions were frightened and threw themselves off the cliff. You! Chongmyung shouted at Hua Sect. Jump down now! What are you doing? That's just rushing to death. I get it! Just jump down! Hearing those words, he looked down the cliff. Hua Sect bit his lip upon the sight. Elder. The question was, how should it be done? But he didn't have time to think. Jump! Hurry! Yes! Seeing the disciples jumping one after another, Hua Sect also flew down the cliff. This is beyond my imagination. If so, everything had to be left in the hands of fate. Chongmyung jumped in the air. When falling, it was a basic practice to lighten the body and utilize footwork techniques to reduce the force of the landing. But right now, Chongmyung had jumped and was shooting to the floor with as much power as possible. Damn it! I don't have time! The distant ceiling was collapsing, and all they could do now was buy some time for a while. But soon, the ground they stood on and everyone here would be buried under the falling rubble. Kung! As Chongmyung slammed into the ground, there was a roar as stone fragments burst into the air. Chongmyung, the path we came from was blocked. I knew it! That fucking bastard! Chongmyung gnashed his teeth. The place they had passed through to come here was already blocked by solid stone walls. Could they cut through it? That can't be done. There was no way the man that created this place would use weak stones. It was likely impossible to cut that stone wall down. Even if they did manage to cut through and enter the passage, there was no guarantee that it wouldn't collapse as well. Chongmyung decided to shelve the complicated thoughts and return to his original belief. Unless Yaksun had truly gone mad, there must be some way to survive this ordeal. Chongmyung, what should we do now? Floor! Chongmyung shouted without delay. To the floor! Right now! There has to be something on the floor! Floor? Don't ask! Just move! Chongmyung drew his sword and poked it into the floor. It was just like when the Wudang was searching for the entrance to the sword tomb. Those who saw his behavior all took out their weapons and thrust them into the floor. For now, they had to follow this man. Here! Here too! The sword won't go in! Here too! But this time, the issue wasn't that nobody could find it. The problem was that everyone was finding it. Chongmyung's face flushed. You bastards! Dig up everything below, now! All of a sudden, everyone was reflexively following Chongmyung's instructions. It was a situation where they could not foresee their lives in the next moment. With everyone living blindly, they had no choice but to follow the words of anyone that seemed to be able to see a solution, even if it was a young boy from Mount Hua who they didn't know. Everyone dug at the ground with bloodshot eyes. Those with weapons swung their weapons, and those without any used their hands to scrape at the hard floor. It didn't matter if their weapons were damaged or their nails ripped off. Their lives depended on clearing this floor. Dig! Dig faster, you brats! Straighten your back and work! Chongmyung was screaming and shouting as he violently swung his sword. Every time his sword slammed into the earth, a human-sized mound was thrown to the side. but the area they needed to cover was too wide. Huh? At that moment, the sword of Wudang penetrated the floor. Kwang! Right! Those useless bastards finally have a use! The Wudang's wide and unremitting sword was the best way to dig up the surroundings. They keep to themselves and always claim they're the best. With all the pills they've eaten, this is the least they could do. Seems like metal. There's a wide metal plate spread out. The sword doesn't work. Hua Sanja drew his sword and approached the one that shouted, "Get out of the way. I will cut..." Huh? Suddenly, Chongmyung rushed in and kicked Hua Sanja to the side. Hua Sanja, who was struck and blown to the side, rolled on the ground and looked at Chongmyung. Oh, wait. What the hell are you? You can't cut this, you crazy bastard. This will save our lives. Huh? Leaving Hua Sanja, who didn't understand the situation at all, Chongmyung raised his head and looked up. Wow! Before he knew it, the rocks fell faster and broke through the cliff. No! They could no longer avoid it. Chongmyung turned his head to the floor. There must be some way. There! Chongmyung roared and flung to the side. It's here! Although buried in soil and rubble, there was something subtly different from the other places. Chongmyung swung his sword lightning fast. Kwang! The soil was scattered in every direction and the floor was exposed. This! A door! Chongmyung's eyes shone. A door. It was the same format as their initial entry into the sword tomb. However, the first door they saw had symbols of swords pointing at one another, while this door had two swords stuck on the floor. Here! Cut it here, you idiot! Hua Sanja rushed forward and swung his sword. Pang! The door was cut into dozens of pieces. At the same time, a hole opened. Chongmyung stretched his hand out without even bothering to look back. Thud. Huh? Baekchun looked at Chongmyung with surprised eyes. Go, Sasuk! Huh? Hey, you crazy! Chongmyung threw Baekchun into the hole, and the disciples of Mount Hua next to him were shoved into the hole in quick succession. Do it on your own if you don't want to die. However, there was no concern for others. Even though he had been helping the others until then, they had to do things for themselves now. Chongmyung realized the only way to get others to survive was to push them into panic. Run! Run! Now! At that moment, a strange sight was reflected in Chongmyung's eyes. In the distance, the Beggars' Union was carrying and bringing the wounded forward. They were helping those that couldn't walk on their own, even though they couldn't guarantee their own lives here. That's crazy! Chongmyung rushed ahead and grabbed Hong Dae-gwang by the collar. What are you doing, you beggar? There are injured people in here. If we leave them like this, they'll die. I'm going to die. Me? Seriously? How did you people even get in here? Chongmyung looked at the people from the Beggars' Union who hadn't seemed to grasp the situation, caught them, and threw them into the hole. Watch the fucking situation and don't mess around! At last, after throwing everyone in the hole, Chongmyung's gaze landed above him. Fuck! The rocks were crashing down as if they wanted him dead. Ah! Chongmyung screamed as he quickly moved. He felt a chilling wind rush to his head. He lay flat on the floor and began to run on all four limbs to the hole. People have 2 legs for walking and running, but when they use all 4 of their arms and legs together, the speed of such movement is truly terrifying. It was like a cockroach running at full speed. What are you doing, you hypocrite? Hurry! Hua Sanja, who shoved the disciples into the hole, was guarding it for everyone and saw Chongmyung. Jump in! Right now! Damn it! Look up! Rocks were plummeting towards Hua Sanja's head. Chongmyung flew off the ground and grabbed Hua Sanja by the waist. He kicked the falling rock to generate force and jumped straight into the hole. It was done with such formidable speed. Chongmyung looked around. Due to the desperate situation above, Chongmyung hadn't noticed that the hole, which seemed so deep, was actually shallow enough for a person to land safely. Chongmyung banged his head on the ground, so he was groaning in pain. Yaksun, you bastard! This was definitely not the fault of Yaksun. This was Chongmyung's fault for not anticipating it. He grabbed his head and groaned a couple more times before jumping up to look around. The space seemed wide if one considered it wide, and narrow if considered narrow. All those who survived here gathered here. Is it all over? Chongmyung, are you alright? Am I alright? Not me. Us! I'm fine. Then Chongmyung saw. Chongmyung looked up with bloodshot eyes. Perhaps Yaksun planned to save anyone that managed to discover and enter this space. But I don't know about the other things, but this place is totally untested. Even Yaksun, who made the sword tomb, couldn't have tested this place. How could anyone be confident that this space would withstand the downpour of boulders? Chongmyung prayed that Yaksun was an unparalleled genius who perfectly managed to secure this place. And at the moment, that thought passed his mind. Kung, kung, kwang. The impact created by falling rocks swept through the space. A shock erupted as if huge cannons were exploding in front of him. The deafening sound sought to rupture their eardrums as their insides twisted uneasily. Those who couldn't handle it coughed blood and crouched to the floor. Screams rang in the surroundings, but the disciples of Mount Hua and the Wudang stood tall. Holding their breath, they observed the situation. But the situation wasn't good. Baekchun's face darkened. Chongmyung, it's collapsing. The metal against the ceiling began to shudder and bend. Although it wasn't broken by the collision, it seemed that it was too much for it to maintain its shape due to the successful impacts. It became clear after this. This place wasn't going to be able to withstand the shock that was coming. Yaksun! You bastard! Why is this the only time you're stupid? If you're smart at the start, you should be smart at the end! At this rate, everyone would be pressed into flat pancakes. I'd rather take death directly. Chongmyung jumped up and stretched his hands out to the ceiling. Kong, kong. Every time the ceiling was impacted, a shock ran through, making it seem like Chongmyung's spine was shattering. Yet, he had to hold on. If the metal wasn't enough to sustain this place, the people here would have to keep the ceiling from collapsing. Chongmyung utilized the internal key within his dungeon and held the ceiling up. What are you bastards doing? Do you all want to die? Hua Sanja was the first to understand Chongmyung's actions. May Buddha watch after us. Hua Sanja hastily ran to assist. Standing in the center, he stretched out both arms while standing next to Chongmyung and supported the ceiling. Gathering all his strength, he pushed against the ceiling with his life on the line. Shortly after, everyone that could stand on their own 2 feet rushed in and supported the ceiling. If no one helped, then everyone would die. So they all had to work together to prevent the collapse. Use everything you can. Use all of your ki. If this falls, then we all die. Chongmyung clenched his teeth with madness filling his eyes. Die? Here? Don't make me laugh. I will? Kung. Not die here, you bastards! Kwang, kwang, kwang. The rocks were falling in unison as the weight of the earth seemed to shock the dark room as if the world itself was collapsing from above.